Welcome to the business podcast of the American Chamber of Commerce in Australia. AmCham business podcasts are hosted by Dr. Duff Watkins. Duff is the director of Exec Search International, an author, and is also on the AmCham Council of Governors. AmCham, bringing business to you.
Hello and welcome to the business podcast of the American Chamber of Commerce in Australia, AmCham, bringing business to you. Today we discuss doing business around the world. Where in the world can you do business today? It's a global economy, but every country is different. So the question is, in which countries is it easiest and most difficult to do business? And today our guest is Andrew Pointer, and he's going to answer that question for us, and he's well poised to do so. Andrew Pointer is the Director of Global Business Development at the TMF Group. Now, TMF is a leading global provider of high-value business services. And what I want to say about that, Andrew, is when I say high value, I mean anything that's important, business critical issues, the things that international companies need to get right in order to do business around the world. And I know TMF is in 80 countries, so you're the go-to people for these things. Is that more or less correct?
That sounds about right. Thank you.
Andrew, let's get started. Now, I understand TMF has just finished this global benchmarking complexity study. So tell us more about that.
Thank you. This is our second annual Global Benchmarking Complexity Index, Duff, in which we ranked 81 jurisdictions across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific and the Americas, according to how complex they are to do business from a regulatory and compliance perspective. The study can be downloaded from www.tmf-group.com. Similar to the inaugural study, data was collected from TMF corporate secretarial experts in more than 100 offices around the world. And we asked objective and subjective questions to determine complexity. The questions included compliance-related topics commonly trending in each jurisdiction, including insights from working with multinationals in each jurisdiction. The burden of managing various international entities continues to be a major headache for multinational companies and their boards and directors. It's a time-consuming and difficult task. It soaks up hundreds of man-hours to monitor deadlines, interpret legislation and prepare foreign documents. Growing internal and external stakeholder pressure, changing regulation and the continued expansion by multinationals into new territories have all added to the compliance responsibilities shouldered by in-house teams.
Now, when you say compliance, we're talking about doing business in accordance with the legislation, the laws of the country in which you're operating, and any idiosyncrasies or eccentricities that they may have.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Compliance with local laws, compliance with FATCA obligations globally, compliance with anti-money laundering legislation, local legislation, that sort of thing. That's what we're talking about. So from a business perspective, the world might be getting smaller but not simpler, I think is a key message here. 2014, for example, saw significant changes in the global business environment and an increase in compliance requirements shouldered by organisations. As part of this, certain organisations have changed significantly in their complexity ranking from the previous year as new rules have come into force, meaning that there are an increasing number of potential pitfalls waiting for businesses expanding into new territories without sufficient knowledge of the local legislative requirements. So what our study does is it condenses complex corporate secretarial requirements and international entity management into a measurable and comparable benchmark and provides insights into why some are more complex than others. And so from a practical point of view, an appreciation of a jurisdiction's complexity can inform a timescale to set up a legal entity and be operationally ready, and also the level of technical expertise required and ongoing compliance obligations, as we just discussed.
So if I'm an international company, and I'm going to give you a commercial here. If I'm an international company, I want to do business in a new country in which I'm ignorant, I could probably go to guys like you at TMF and get help with all the things that matter, because that's the thing about foreign countries. They're foreign.
Absolutely. What TMF does is we're in 80 countries, as you mentioned in our introduction, and our catchphrase is we have local knowledge in a global environment. So we understand all the local laws, we have local contacts offices in each of those 80 countries, all owned by TMF, and we have the global reach in order to service companies as they expand or who are already expanded, and we can help simplify their compliance and entity management obligations globally. In addition, of course, we provide tax accounting and payroll services as standalone services, which I can talk about later, but that's the essence.
And I guess the point is you've done your homework and your research, so you actually know what you're talking about, which is kind of reassuring for the customer. Okay, so tell me more about the studies. What did you find?
Okay, well, according to the objective questions findings, South America was found to be the most complex region, probably no surprise to most people, to operate in, and accounts for the top 3 places, and half of the index is top 20 in terms of complexity, including Brazil, which climbed 15 places to number 2 in the rankings.
I've done a lot of work in Brazil. Yes, I want to confirm that.
Indeed.
It's difficult.
Indeed. So I think it's quite well known, and lots of studies have been done on the complexity of Brazil, and indeed it is a very, very complex place to do business.
But you said they're not the most complex.
Well, they're not. Interestingly, for the second year running, Argentina has been ranked as the most complex place for multinational companies to do business, according to our Global Benchmarking Index study. So Argentina ranked first, Brazil second, and Bolivia third as the most complex. Poland is the 7th most complex. It's the only European country actually to feature in the top 20. Despite significant reform, thanks in part to the systems and laws inherited from the former Soviet Union. Others in the top 10 that may interest people are the UAE and South Korea, which ranks as number 5, interestingly enough.
Okay, now these are where it's the most complex to do business.
Indeed.
And in colloquial terms, that probably means it's the most difficult, the hardest to do business.
Yep.
Well, but those are very different countries. What makes it so hard? What makes it so complex?
Well, it's a combination of things, primarily local laws or the lack of local laws, and sometimes legislation can make it more complex, sometimes less complex. And I can talk a little bit about that further on. But fundamentally, it's the legal requirements in order to set up a business, in order to conduct a business, and the gaps or the onerous obligations around that. So, for example, of the top 10 in the APAC region, interestingly, top 20, interestingly, places 9 to 15 were taken by APAC countries. So a few no surprises there: Indonesia 9th, Thailand 10th, Japan 11th, China 12th, Philippines 13th, Vietnam 14th, and Malaysia 15th. So, in some of these countries, there's developing laws, changing laws, and that impacts on the ease or difficulty for doing business.
So those are the usual suspects and
Indeed.
our reasons where it's okay.
Indeed.
So it sounds like we're steadily working our way up from the most complex to the least complex. Are we heading in that direction?
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
We can get to the least.
Okay. Okay.
So in terms of the most complex and the reasons for that, there's a range of reasons. We touched on that briefly before. Fundamentally, let's take Brazil. High levels of government bureaucracy and red tape are cited as key reasons for Brazil making doing business locally extremely challenging. For example, it can take 54 days to start a business in Brazil compared to 6 in the UK. The research identified local legal systems as a key driver in complexity, as I said, and those countries that operated in a civil law framework, interestingly, including many South American countries, were typically ranked higher than those with a common law framework. It's likely that Brazil and other jurisdictions in South America will continue to feature prominently in our complexity index as the development of their legal systems really is falling behind their peers. In the Russian Federation, for example, the recent enactment of the Russian Civil Code significantly overhauled the corporate landscape, creating rules for governing legal entities. And although the legislation has come into force, there's little precedent for how the Russian courts will interpret that. So that creates issues and complexity. Other complexity drivers include economic and political turbulence, such as the recent presidential elections in Indonesia and the uncertainties, the formation of a new parliament in Thailand in June 2014. In China, the administrative duties of legal entity management places a big burden on business, as does the complexity of operating in a multi-province environment. Shanghai is a favoured province for foreign direct investment, has a special economic zone, however, and has seen significant reduction in complexity with recent administrative, legal and fiscal reforms. But nonetheless, it's a complex environment to do business. And we also touched on before some of the other issues. So there's significant changes in the global business environment and an increase in compliance requirements due to FATCA, anti-bribery and corruption legislation, the OECD base erosion and profit shifting project, and changes in international company law. All these things make doing business complex. Interestingly, in terms of trending compliance topics in the course of 2014, what we found was whistleblowing and cybersecurity featured most heavily.
When you say feature, with that, the most common occurrence or the most common complaint?
Most common trends in terms of issues globally for the compliance that business had to be concerned about. So, whistleblowing programs are increasingly being implemented by multinationals as they want to raise their global governance standards and identify and address weaknesses across their global operations, and primarily in order to defend stakeholder value, they have to do this. And another interesting element is APAC is generally more time-consuming compliance than EMEA or the US because of the divergent cultures, divergent economies relative to the homogeneous nature in the US, for example. So that's just a couple of takes on the why it's more complex.
I guess the question that Australians wonder is, where do we fit into the international competition here for complexity?
Well, you'll be pleased to know Australia, along with a couple of our close neighbours, are in fact some of the easiest places to do business. According to our objective questions, again, the UK, including the Channel Islands and Ireland, are ranked amongst the least complex places in the world to do business, alongside Australia, Hong Kong and New Zealand. Ireland ranks 79th, Hong Kong 80th, Jersey 81st. Australia ranked at 76, so that's pretty good. New Zealand 72. The US ranked at 54, so that's also relatively not complex. Others of note: Denmark 70, the Netherlands 68, and Singapore at 59. So we are in a part of the world that Australia is a relatively least complex place.
And the higher score being the better.
Higher score being better. Yeah, number one, the most complex.
Now, I've said for years, I've talked to visiting U.S. business people and politicians and dignitaries. One of the reasons Australians in the U.S. can do business so well is because the legal system is comparable, the accounting systems are comparable, and they're also compatible. There's transparency. You can see what you're getting and who you're dealing with. There's not much to obfuscate it, except possibly the language. And that's. But is that more or less correct?
More or less. More advanced economies in the Western world tend to be certainly more transparent and more obvious in terms of what needs to be done and when, because they are more advanced legal systems and accordingly can be relatively easier to set up an operation or conduct an operation. But having said that, as I mentioned earlier, legislation can also add complexity because it can have new requirements that in effect make it more complex. So it's a bit of depending on the jurisdiction. But obviously, US and Australia, there's obviously been a lot of business done over many, many years, and so there is a lot of understanding of the legal requirements and what has to be done to set up and operate in both countries.
Okay. Let me ask you a similar question. We asked about what are the ingredients, what makes it complex, and let's ask the other side of that question. What makes it easy to deal with?
Well, I guess the question is, why are they the easiest? And Ireland has retained its place in the top three least complex business destinations for the second year running, primarily due to a common law framework as opposed to civil law, which we talked about with South America. A very stable political environment, again, in comparison to many South American countries, a very strong legal framework and a very pro-business attitude. So a combination of things. And, initiatives in Ireland such as the Knowledge Development Box, which will enhance Ireland's onshore intellectual property regime, enhances Ireland as one of the most popular destinations for international business. In Hong Kong, for example, the enactment of the company ordinance reduced the complexity ranking by introducing sweeping changes to the corporate environment, such as a single constitutional document replacing memorandum and articles of association, par value shares and authorised capital being abolished, and a court-free procedure for capital reductions has also been reduced. So that all helps. Again, laws that have made things simpler. In Singapore, they're continuing to implement regulatory reform, with 2014 claiming the largest number of legislative changes to the 1967 Companies Act. So again, legislation helping with transparency and helping move away some of the barriers to doing business. And while, say, in New Zealand, the recent Financial Reporting Act and Companies Act saw a slight increase in their complexity ranking given new requirements with companies having to appoint a resident director as a person. So that added slightly to the complexity. So it can vary, as I mentioned, in terms of whether legislation makes it more complex or less complex.
Do you reckon, is there a social cost to these companies when they do away with the barriers? In other words, and you may not be in a position to answer this, but does the population suffer, is what I want to ask, when the complexity of the business is reduced?
I don't know that that's something that TMF tends to engage in the social element of doing business, to be frank. Suffice to say that what we do is try and make business as easy, as seamless, and as compliant as possible globally, and that therefore helps do business quicker, and helps in turn, I'm sure, have flow-on effects to other elements of the economy.
That certainly is the argument of. I guess I'm just going to assume you've been following the Trans-Pacific Partnership and its evolution, and how it's about 12 different countries getting together to do exactly many of the things that you've been saying, Andrew, is to make it less complex, make it more transparent, basically make it easier to do business with one another.
Indeed. Well, the key of TMF's value, if you like, is that we effectively help business ensure that with our local knowledge and our truly global reach, we have innovative approaches. We're seamless. We can ensure efficiency, reliability, and flexibility in everything that we do, and that is a great value to business when you're wanting to expand into a new and unknown country, whether it's a large multinational that's never been to a country for the first time. TMF can help set up there. So we have many global clients in that scenario. Alternatively, there could be already set up in multi-countries, multiple service providers, very hard to manage, very complex, a lot of hidden cost time. TMF can step in under one roof and manage the process of entity management and compliance. And in addition to that, of course, as I mentioned, tax, accounting and payroll administrative compliance as well.
Can you walk me through that? Okay, let's say I want to set up a business in Argentina. We'll make it difficult.
Yep.
That's the most complex.
Nice and easy.
Okay, I can grunt in Spanish from my high school days.
Yep.
I want to set up my business down there.
Yep.
I call up you guys. I say, Andrew, TMF, I need some advice. What do I need to know in order to go into this environment? Lovely place, by the way. Buenos Aires is one of my favorite cities. But okay, so what do I need to know? What do you tell me?
Okay, what we tell you is I'd be your single point of contact globally for any business. We, in most countries, have a guide to doing business that we can provide to clients, which gives some overarching view of what's involved in setting up a business, both from a corporate secretarial point of view, an entity point of view, from an accounting requirements, administration requirements point of view, taxation and payroll. That can be provided to clients. Typically also a call will be arranged with technical colleagues in those countries in which the needs and issues faced by business would be discussed by telephone. Of course, also, if required, people in those countries can go and visit our offices and talk to people. And essentially then we develop a scope of needs and a proposal which flows from that. So you will have, through that process of guide, through conversation, through understanding your issues and needs, a very good understanding of what's required in that country. And all our proposals set out very clearly what the services are, what the fees are, what any assumptions are, exemptions are, and so forth. But that local knowledge, and I might add in this context, in all our offices globally, you pick up the phone, you'll speak to a person in English. There is English speakers in every country, and also obviously the local language. And in many of these countries, multiple languages. In Australia, for example, I'm in the minority speaking English. There's Spanish, Chinese, South American, you name it. So that's another key value of TMF. You can have the confidence that you can speak in the local language, English, and multi languages as well.
And okay, let me cut to the chase here. Okay, I'm going into this foreign country. We're picking on poor Argentina. But okay, are you going to hold my hand? Is TMF going to hold my hand and walk me through step by step?
TMF will take away the headache. That's what we do. We provide all the administrative support required so that you can get on and do business. And we will hold your hand, ensure that you are compliant, both from a legal point of view, from an entity point of view, tax, accounting and payroll point of view. And that is very important for business, as I've mentioned earlier, with all the complex legal requirements globally, be it OECD requirements and others. It's very important for business, for boards, for stakeholder value that there is compliance, that there is no penalties coming down the track, that there is no major issues that business need to be aware of that can cause issues to stakeholder value, can cause boards a lot of headaches. And that's where TMF really does come to the fore.
Yeah, it's the surprises that you want to avoid.
Absolutely.
Now this leads me to ask perhaps our last question. When you did the survey, Andrew, did you notice any surprises along the way?
Fundamentally, from year on year, they were similar. The findings were quite similar. Some countries moved up in rankings, some moved down, absolutely. But fundamentally, there was similarities year on year in terms of the complexity and the rankings, with a couple of exceptions in the APAC region, as I mentioned before. But really, the element of complexity is pervasive globally due to the international laws and due to the fact that laws are changing all the time. Business need to have some local on-the-ground knowledge to ensure compliance, and that's what TMF provides. And globally, being able to provide that is really valuable to business. So, these are the sorts of things. And I might add also, we provide some other services such as aviation finance services for SPVs, fund administration services for real estate trusts, and we implement international structuring as well. So, we provide some bespoke services, specialised services as well globally to assist business do business globally. And as you mentioned in the intro, we fundamentally offer that business-critical financial, legal and human resource administrative services to help clients operate corporate structures, finance vehicles and investment funds globally. So we really do cover the gamut, if you like, of business wanting to do business globally.
Clearly. Now, you said the results of this international survey can be downloaded for our listeners. So can you give me that website address again, please?
That's www.tmf-group.com. And please feel free to contact me for any global business needs that you may have as your single TMF contact point, and I would be very happy to provide the report to you. I'm part of a combined Sydney and Melbourne office of over 70 people. I might just give you my details, andrew.pointer, Pointer, at tmf-group.com. I'm based in Sydney. My direct line is 8988 5863. So feel free to contact me and I can provide a copy of the report also.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you, Andrew. We'll finish here today. You've been listening to the business podcast of the American Chamber of Commerce in Australia. Our guest today has been Andrew Pointer, who is the Director of Global Business Development at the TMF Group. Now, if you folks have liked what you've heard, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, you can find other podcasts, advice about international trade, information about U.S. businesses and how to do business with the U.S. at the AmCham website, which is amcham.com.au. That's amcham.com.au. AmCham, bringing business to you.
You've been listening to the business podcast of the American Chamber of Commerce in Australia. This podcast is supported by Lenovo and VML. Lenovo is one of the world's leading personal technology companies, producing innovative PCs and mobile internet devices. Lenovo, for those who do. VML is a full-service digital marketing agency that can take you where you want to go. Everything we are is in everything we do. This is AmCham, bringing business to you.